So our Torah portion is Shmini, and it's found in Leviticus chapter 19 all the way through Leviticus chapter 11. We're quickly going to go into the overview. It starts off with Aaron and his sons. They finally are officiated as priests. Divine presence comes and to dwell in the sanctuary, and then we have Nadav and Avihu. They die because they bring in strange fire. Then you have the kosher laws. These are animals permissible and forbidden for consumption. Then you have the clean and unclean waters. And then at the end of this Torah portion, Adonai says to make a distinction between clean and unclean. So this Torah portion is fascinating because God spends half of this week's Torah portion containing two basic laws dealing with animals fit for consumption after the inauguration period. The presence of God dwells and comes and sanctions his place, his holy presence in the sanctuary, and immediately Aaron's sons die by bringing in strange fire right in the center of the commotion of removing Nadav and Avihu, their carcasses, and Adonai starts saying this in Leviticus chapter 10, verses 8 through 10. Adonai spoke to Aaron saying, "Do not drink wine or fermented drink, neither you nor your sons with you when you go into the tent of meeting, so that you do not die. This is to be a statute forever throughout your generations. You are to make a distinction between holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean." This is the same wording that we see at the end of Leviticus chapter 11, verse 47. So guess what I'll be talking about today? I'll be talking about, here's a hint, Ezekiel chapter 44, verses 23 to 24. It says, "And they, the priest, shall teach my people the difference between the holy and the unholy, and cause them to discern between the clean and the unclean." So that's right. I'll be talking about discerning what is clean and what is unclean. You see, God took the time to teach us to make a distinction between such matters. So how much more should all teachers be doing the same thing? But let me be clear. I'm not trying to convict anyone or judge anyone. What you eat and do outside your home or outside these walls, that is between you, God, and your free will. So all I'm going to do is just present to you what the Word says, my interpretation of the Word, and so that you can discern and perceive and to recognize what God is saying within our Torah portion. Okay? So first, it is noteworthy to mention that the first time clean and unclean animals are referenced, it is in Genesis chapter 7, where Adonai spoke to Noah. And he told Noah, said, "On every clean animal you shall take with you 7 of each kind, male and female. And of the animals which themselves are not clean, 2 male and female." So Noah, he had to know the difference between what was unclean and clean. So the animals being unclean and clean are like the moral laws, you can say. They have been in effect since the beginning of creation. Thus, we cannot brush them off with an argument that they are merely done away with or were given only to ancient Israel. Okay, with all that to be said, let's start with their first category of animals mentioned in Leviticus chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. It says, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying that these are the living things which you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth. Whatever has a split, divided hoof, and chews cud among the animals that you may eat." So this is simple enough. The land animals. The criteria of the land animals is that they have to have both a cloven hoof and chewing the cud. Simple. No need to list any animals because this is discerned through observation alone. They have to have 2. The next few verses in Leviticus 11:44, it says, "Nevertheless, you shall not eat of those that only chew cud or have a split hoof." And then we have a list: camel, coney, hare, and swine. Simple. The criteria of the unclean animals are those that only chew the cud or only have a split hoof. And God, in his mercy and in his gracious kindness, he gives us example animals. Taking this for face value, it doesn't really make sense why we have these laws in the beginning. But we must have faith what God is commanding and communicating it to us as to be true. It either falls like this. Either you accept it or not. But if you ask me, and if you're like me, and you say, why? What makes the clean land animals different from the unclean animals? What sets all these animals apart? And this is what we're going to go into. So in all the clean land animals, they are grazing animals, cud chewers, they have cloven hoofs, they're mostly herbivores, and they have a rumen. You see, the rumen is where the food is pre-digested in the first stomach, passing through the other stomachs in a continuum. We call this rumination. And then the bacteria in the rumen can convert all the material into the digestible matter and provide nutrients into the food that is being broken down and digested. After food that has passed through the digestive, it then goes into the real stomach, abomasum. This is the fourth stomach. And the bacteria is then digested in the process. So this system of digestion is important because it eliminates all bacteria from getting into the meat. As opposed to unclean animals, whatever they eat will become part of their meat, including swine, who has a single stomach system just like ours. Okay, so that is the first category. That is the land animals. Next, in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 9, we move on to aquatic animals. It says, for all that are in the waters, you may eat whatever has fins and scales within the waters. This is including seas and rivers, salt water and fresh water. And this criteria is simple enough. The aquatic animals, they have to have two fins and scales. They both have to be present, and that is a must for consumption. No need to list any animals here because this can be discerned through observation, because all scale-bearing fish possess fins. Yes, there are fish with scales with no fins, and fish with fins and no scales. So they do not fit this criteria. They have to have fins and scales. So all clean aquatic animals must have both of this criteria. Why? Because all clean aquatic animals, they prefer to be herbivores. These fish are generally found in deep or fast-flowing waters, which means it would be a clean water. Algae eaters or picky eaters primarily, and they have a detoxifying enzyme in their digestive system. So all the scales of these animals are like, think of it like chainmail, whether in the seas or in the rivers, fresh or salt. The scales help the fish to repel toxins and other dangers in the water. Also, their gill rackers and their blood circulation, the kidneys of these fish, and the skin all play an important role in maintaining the fish internal body temp and checking the effects of osmosis. So, which is different from the unclean animals, because most of the unclean animals, they solve most of their problems by retaining mercury or urea, which is other animal waste, which is toxic, to help with these blood regulations. So all clean fish animals, they have a detoxifying system within their body that help the body's temperature remain constant and can adapt to seasonal change by using this enzyme in the digestive system. And also they reject mostly dead food, and they detest polluted waters or contaminated waters. So after this, we have a list of unclean avian animals. This is found in Leviticus chapter 11, verses 13 through 19. So these unclean flying creatures is the eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the red kite, any black kite, any ravens, all owls, osprey, the stork, any heron, the hoopoe, and the bat. So there is not a single clean animal listed in the Torah. Why? Because there is a common theme with the clean avian animals. And what is that? Well, here's my list. They are not a bird of prey, does not devour food while flying, doesn't need to sit or sleep while digesting food. They digest their food well. The food does not ferment in their stomachs. They have a croup, not a bulge, that's important, and has a gizzard, which has a double lining, which can be easily separated. and the hind toe and the middle front toe are both elongated. So the clean birds eat plant material strictly, respectfully. And some of the clean criteria are observational, as you can see, such as the toe or their feeding habits. Next, we move on to Leviticus chapter 11, verses 20 through 23, where it says, all flying insects that walk on all fours are detestable to you, yet you may eat from all wing-creeping things that go on all fours, which have legs above their feet, with which to hop on the earth. You may eat from any kind of the locust, any kind of the katydid, any kind of the cricket, any kind of the grasshopper, but all winged creeping things that have 4 feet are loathsome to you. So here is the list of all the clean insects. And if you don't know what a katydid looks like, that is a picture right there. So here's the clean insects. These are all locusts, all katydids, all grasshoppers, and all crickets. They all look like that. They have a back hind quarter. They have feet for hopping. 4 in the front, the last 2 for jumping. That's all clean to eat. No questions there. Observational. But the all unclean animals, in its entirety, they all share a common theme. What is it? They are carnivores, omnivores, and or scavengers. They lack the corrective digestive system. They cannot metabolize their food properly. They have poor sweat glands. That means that they can't not remove toxins from their body getting into the meat. They have poor blood circulation, and they have a fast digestion to flesh time. So why is this all important? Who cares? For those of you who have heard me teach, I have taught that we are all vessels of God, and God cares what is inside us. That is including what is mentally, spiritually, and what is in our hearts, and what is coming in and out of our mouths. So this is why it's important. But God answers these things at the end of the Torah portion. In Leviticus 11, verse 44 through 45, he says, I am Adonai your God, therefore sanctify yourselves and be holy, for I am holy. You are not to defile yourselves with any kind of creeping things that moves on the earth, for I am Adonai who brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God, therefore you shall be holy, for I am holy. So God places these animal laws with new perspective. The consumption of these animals obstructs the person's ability to elevate and sanctify oneself. To become holy, a person must sanctify themselves, meaning that the road to holiness does not mean or begin with sublime thoughts or the study of lofty ideas solely. Nadav and Avihu, they teach us that a person must sanctify themselves in the lowly, simple things, not just with the kavanah, the motivation and the intention of the heart, with a personal behavior and morality. But we are to learn today, we should do this with our appetite, with an appetite in the food that we eat. Since God liberated you, it is only proper that you show gratitude to him by living up to his goals and standards and how he sees fit. Not only what enters our vessels on a spiritual level, but on a physical level. God's purpose in delivering you from Egypt was to make you more like himself. And that is to recognize his greatness without an in-between from this world. The goal of holiness is the reason for the clean and unclean laws. These instructions on laws make us learn how to distinguish between things that appear to be similar, like the cow and a camel, but also distinguish between the purity and the contamination, discerning between what is good and what is evil. Rather than assume that the Tanakh or the Old Testament is done away with, we should trust that our Lord knows what is good for his creatures, and we should appreciate God's word because he does not change. As it comes more knowledge about animals and its effects on the health, modern science is verifying what the Bible has been teaching for millennia, that there are certain animals that are harmful and are not meant to be eaten. Therefore, we can see why Adonai made specific animals as clean, that is fit or appropriate to eat. Even then, however, true worshipers do not need scientific explanation and proofs. The simple fact that the maker of our bodies tells us what to avoid is reason enough to obey. The believer calling is a combination, let me be clear. It is a combination of grace, faith, law, and good deeds. It is not just a matter of grace only, or faith only, or a matter of God's commandments only, or a matter of good deeds only, but all four working together for the purpose of self-refinement and sanctification. That includes grace, faith, commandments, and good deeds. Each has a specific place and purpose in the life of each believer so that the destiny of each human being may be ultimately achieved. And what is that? Living forever in the family of God within his kingdom to come. So now, with all that I've just said, let's go and discern what is holy and unholy, clean and unclean. And with that, chazak u'baruch, be strong and be blessed. Let's bring the worship team up.